makes it clear that the president's job is to faithfully execute the laws. And in my view, the president has not faithfully executed the laws. We have a system of government outlined in our Constitution with the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Congress has its job to do, and so does the president. And when there's conflicts like this between the legislative branch and the administrative branch, it's, in my view, our responsibility to stand up for this institution in which we serve.
Middle-class families can't wait for Republicans in Congress to do stuff. So sue me.
Speaker of the House John Boehner has a problem. He is trying to remain steadfast and galvanize his party in their battle with Barack Obama. He firmly believed his lawsuit against the president was the right thing to do. And it did get some interesting traction for a few days. And now even his friends may be backing off. That and much more as we welcome into MidPoint former military, former member of NASA, one-time communications director for the Republican Party of Texas, a founding blogger and producer at Hot Air, Bryan Preston joins us again on the show. Bryan, thanks a lot for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
When I look at the whole lawsuit story, and I just step back for a moment and look at what's been happening here in the last few days, maybe the last week or so, I am struck by the fact that can we just not say that Speaker Boehner just really overreached on this one?
Well, I'm not sure that he overreached. I just don't think there are a lot of good options for the Republicans in Congress right now to stop this president. I mean, this president has, in the way I've come to understand how he's operating, he's basically hacked the Constitution. And what I mean by that is when you have a computer hacker, they exploit weaknesses in a system. They'll exploit weaknesses in an operating system, security system, that sort of thing. And this president is a constitutional lawyer, and he's figured out that by having a divided Congress with the Senate in the hands of someone loyal to him instead of being loyal to the Constitution, he can effectively override Congress, and there's not a lot they can do about it. I mean, the choices in front of Boehner right now are to either file this lawsuit or to file some sort of articles of impeachment, which we know will go nowhere and would threaten to change the subject of the election onto less favorable territory for the Republicans, or to do nothing, or to try and cut off funding to federal agencies and that sort of thing. But the problem with the latter is the House can't really do that without help from the Senate. They're not going to get help from the Senate. We also know that the Senate is not going to countenance any sort of discipline against this president. So Boehner's left with either doing nothing or filing some sort of lawsuit to try and galvanize opposition to the president. He's done that. I don't think it's a great move, but I'm not sure I would call it an overreach. It's pretty much an underreach if you look at what this president
else that he can do. You even said yourself, it doesn't seem as if impeachment will go anywhere whatsoever.
No.
It seems as if at this point, if you look at some of the statements that are coming out now, for instance, Eric Erickson is editor of the conservative blog Red State. It doesn't get much more conservative than that. He has come out and said what I think is the best. John Boehner's lawsuit is nothing more than political theater and a further Republican waste of taxpayer dollars. Isn't this just another waste at this point? I realize that, again, we're looking at only two things that he can do, but isn't this going to backfire sooner or later? Because it won't go anywhere. If you ask every legal scholar, they will tell you that this lawsuit is bogus. It has nowhere to go.
Yeah, it probably doesn't have a lot of traction or much room for maneuvering. However, Boehner is really caught in a pincer here because he has folks like Erickson claiming he's doing nothing, and then when he does something, they slam him for that, and they want him. Erickson wrote about cutting off federal funding and the fact that the House holds the purse strings. They do anything unilaterally. They can't really move on funding or anything else without the Senate. So right now we're in this holding pattern because the president, he's clearly signaling that he's going to override the laws more often as we lead up to the election. And he is literally daring people to sue him over this. And he sounds, honestly, like a spoiled child. It's strange how his voice goes so high and just sounds so childish when he throws out that little taunt for people to sue him. So we have a lawless president, and we have a divided Congress that's unable to discipline him. And that's just where we are, and I think that's where we're going to be until the election. And if the Republicans take the Senate, then they're going to have a lot more power and a lot more leeway to move against the president.
Would it be not fair to say, though, that we had have, in your opinion and in your words, a lawless president who is getting away with certain things simply because we're at this point. The Republicans have allowed it to reach this stage, and they have not done enough. So they've basically had to reach into thin air and find anything, if they possibly can, just to try something. It's throwing it against the wall at this point, is what many people see it as.
Well, many people see it as that way. I don't agree that it's because the Republicans haven't done enough. I think the problem is Harry Reid. In the past, the Senate would defend its prerogatives, the House would defend its prerogatives, and they would defend themselves against presidential authority without really much regard for party loyalty. They would put the Constitution and the country first, and Harry Reid is not doing that. Harry Reid is not defending the Senate's prerogatives. He is putting party loyalty above the country and above the Senate and above the Constitution, and that's really the problem. The Republicans, they lost the Congress back in 2006, 2008. They got half of it back in 2010, but that is not enough for them by themselves to stop the president. So the problem really is Harry Reid and this alliance that he has with Barack Obama. If Harry Reid is no longer the Senate Majority Leader after the fall elections, he's no longer empowered to stop what the Republicans want to do. People forget that the Republicans have passed dozens of bills that would repeal Obamacare. They've passed dozens of bills dealing with the budget. They've tried to deal with immigration and the border security. They've tried to deal with a number of issues, but Harry Reid just won't bring any of these measures up for a vote. It's his fault.
All right, now let me bring up something else here. John Boehner has given very few details, very few specifics of the complaint. He has failed to specify which of the president's 182 executive actions are problematic and which laws he's ignored. So he's failed to do all this in putting this lawsuit out there, though. Isn't he taking a gambit, and isn't it very possible that John Boehner is going to lose his ability to lead the Republicans? Because when this thing finally comes to its conclusion, it will mean absolutely nothing. And now you have Republicans running for the hills just to get away from him at this point. It seems as if he's already losing a lot of his power and his ability to lead.
Yeah, that is a possibility. If you're going to bring a lawsuit, then you need to specify what your charges are. And it's not even difficult to come up with the charges in this case. The president has rewritten Obamacare about 30 times, 36, 37 times, depending on how you count, and he's not empowered to do that. That was a law passed by the Democrats in Congress. He signed it. He's not empowered to rewrite it. He's also not empowered to rewrite immigration law, and he's done that at least twice. And we have this situation on the border right now that has been created because of this president's lawlessness. Those are two easy things Boehner could have brought up, and he hasn't brought them up. So I do agree with you there. I don't think this lawsuit is that great an idea, and I do think that there is a possibility he could lose his leadership, or at least lose his credibility among the Republican leadership, because the rank and file just don't see this lawsuit as anything more than either a stopgap or, possibly political theater, as Erickson says.
All right, let's spin to something else which will certainly get your attention, seeing as a lot of it is going on in Texas right now. Earlier today, the president asked not for $2 billion from Congress for the border crisis, but he asked for almost $4 billion. Here's the president.
Republicans are mad at me for taking these actions. They're not doing anything, and then they're mad that I'm doing something. I'm not sure which of the things I've done they find most offensive, but they've decided they're going to sue me for doing my job. I might have said in the heat of the moment during one of these debates, I want to raise the minimum wage, so sue me when I do. But I didn't think they were going to take it literally.
It is always funny until someone gets hurt, as a parent probably once said somewhere down the line here. Let's take that now and put this with Texas Governor Rick Perry, who has asked many times in letters for the president to visit the border to see what is actually going on with the immigration crisis that is there. The president did not answer a lot of those letters. There now was an offer for the president to shake hands and to have a brief meeting with Governor Perry at the airport. The governor has turned that down, said, I don't need a handshake. I'm not going to shake your hand. We need to actually be at the border to do something, to see what's going on. Your take on what is now turning into yet another public relations nightmare for the president with regard to immigration?
Well, Ed, it would be a nightmare if it was possible to embarrass this president. The fact is, he has a Katrina situation on the border of his own making. Katrina was a surprise. What's happened on the border is not a surprise. The federal government actually anticipated it. This president, though, instead of going to the border, instead of meeting with the governor of the state or the senators of the state, he's meeting with Robert Rodriguez, who made this hyper-violent exploitation film that promotes illegal immigration. It's called Machete, and then he made the sequel Machete Kills. That's where this president's going when he comes to Texas, not going to the border. I think it's just impossible to embarrass him, and I think it's, for that reason, it's not a nightmare for him. His base doesn't care for the most part, and he doesn't care for the most part. He has a situation that he ought to be taking care of, and he's not taking care of it. And the people of Texas are suffering. I was looking at some stats just the other day. The city of McAllen, which is on the border, has already said that they have spent $75,000 dealing with the influx of illegal aliens on the border, these so-called kids. Not all of them are kids. A lot of them are teenagers and young adults. That's going to be amplified and magnified all over the country. These cities are going to be dealing with an important base. This is where the Air Force conducts all of its training for enlisted and officers as they go into the service. This is not some place where you want outbreaks of disease. And yet this president, he comes to town, he's not even dealing with the border crisis at all. You just can't embarrass the guy.
Brian, we're all out of time, unfortunately, but I have a feeling that we could go on for hours more on this. It will be interesting to see if indeed there is a handshake or some kind of a meeting or really what happens, because this is going to be a fluid situation here, I think, for the next couple of days. Always a pleasure, Brian. We'll do it again real soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. My pleasure.
All right. And again, just to bring everybody up to speed, as noted, the president has said, I'll meet you at the airport. Rick Perry has said no. Rick Perry's doing a little politicking as well, but quite frankly, it may be politicking that is necessary at this point. Why it will be a lot tougher for people to defend the NSA's actions and how damaging the latest from Edward Snowden really is. That and a lot more coming up right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.